Okay, all right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Join your palm, bow. Four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Good evening to you all, and maybe morning to some of you. We continue on with the study of the patriarchs and the time period in which the patriarchs were appearing in terms of the Chan patriarchs. And we're going to go a bit sideways here for a little bit. And we had talked about Daoxuan and Hongzhen. And Daoxuan also had another Dharma heir, and his name was Niutou. Full name, I think, Niutou Farong. Sometimes he's referred to as Farong. Last week, I think I was referring to him as Faro. But this is an important development that was happening in the practice of Chan. And although sometimes he's recognized as a patriarch, historically Hongzhen is recognized as the lineage holder there. But you may know of him when I tell you what poem he had written, which is Song of Mind. And Song of Mind is one of my favorite Chan poems because it just goes directly there. And it's just incredible because when you read it, every single line is filled with this deep and profound wisdom. And you look at it and you really, it does you almost injustice to the practice to move too quickly through the Song of Mind, just simply because there's so much there. But because of time constraints, no, we can't go through it all unless we say, okay, we're going to dedicate this whole class to Song of Mind. But Niutou was the head of the Oxhead school, and it was a very interesting time period. This was during the Tang Dynasty, probably from the beginning until the ending of the Tang Dynasty. The Oxhead school was there till the ending of the 10th century. And it was an interesting school. It was very similar to what was there in the East Mountain doctrine, except it was more pared down, more shaved in terms of how it presented the Dharma. It wasn't interested in precepts or interested in too much of the doctrine as much as it just went right to mind. And when it said right to mind, it was also that school that brought up no mind. And so to simply look at it from the idea of mind or no mind, and they actually in Chan language, mind and no mind are the same. But to us it's difficult because we go, well, can't you pick one? But if you pick one, then there's a duality there. Let me see. This particular school, they're said that it served as the framework for the Platform Sutra. And although the Platform Sutra was something that was advanced by Shen, the fifth patriarch, the sixth patriarch's disciple, Huineng was advanced by Shen to be the sixth patriarch over Shen Shu. And there was a bit of politicking around at that time in order to have Shen Shu, who had been recognized by the emperor at that time to be the sixth patriarch, but Shen Hui was much better in the diplomatic side of it to have him replaced. And then there's a big thing that was made, especially in the Platform Sutra. But although it's kind of funny because they talk about Northern School and Southern School, one is slow school and the other sudden. There isn't that kind of a difference between the schools as one would advance. And I think sometimes that might have been brought on, this distinguishing brought on by the scholars or some Hollywood producer wanting to produce some kind of a schism between the schools. It was interesting because that was more so when Mohyang had gone to Tibet and was debating from the school of this gradual practice versus sudden practice, and Tibetans couldn't get the understanding of the sudden practice, and they misunderstood, and they thought, well, if one gets a realization, how can you say that's enlightenment? It's not enlightenment. And so but it's a realization, and that realization can come on suddenly, but not without particular roots in place that would be there. And so that was the thing that was happening with Hui Ning, and that's why in the beginning of the Platform Sutra, we see Hui Ning hearing the Diamond Sutra and instantly understanding it, and or I should say penetrating it. And when he penetrated the sutra, then he got it, but it wasn't because he simply was heard it clearly. His causes and condition, who knows how many lifetimes, had brought him to the point where he could hear something and have this turning phrase produce this kind of a deep realization that he had. But his realization at that time was great, and that's why he had gone to see Hongjin. And it's very interesting because the whole meeting with Hongjin, depending on whose version of the Platform Sutra you have, has it written in different ways. Some of them, it's the Hongjin was impolite to all the way till he was downright insultive of him, calling them rat people, the people from the South. And so I'm not sure what is there in the original text of if we could find that out in Chinese, whether it was kind of sanitized down and cleaned up, or whether this harsh language was just somebody embellishing that. I don't know. But I read one for the first time today that was talking about him and his the people from the South as rat people and really disgusting and stuff. And I hadn't seen that one before. But in any case, there was this kind of a way of, not only was Hongjin the patriarch, but also Hui Ning was exceeding the teacher to be. And it's very interesting in terms of this as to what Hui Ning got from Hongjin, and he really didn't get that much teaching from him. It's an interesting thing. Sometimes people think that when you're with a master, the master sits you down and you're sitting there by a fireplace and he speaks for hours on end about the Dharma. But with let's say particular students, it isn't in that way. It's actually more mind to mind. But that's something that can become very romanticized in terms of what mind to mind means, or it could be something that people will say, oh, that's baloney. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just explaining to you that when you're around a master, you really listen and you try to pick up as much as you can. But the point is, and the point that the master tells you is, Make it yours. Practice. Don't think you're going to get it through your ears. Practice. You're going to get it through the absorption by mind of the ego. And the mind is already there. We just have this in a reverse order. That's why I'm always telling you that the ancients talked about turning the mind's eye inward. And that's what happened with Hui Ning in that moment. The mind's eye reversed on him in a way that was very incredible. He was ripe for it at that moment. And there was this subitism, this sudden enlightenment of him. And so, but it's not something that we say, if you get a realization that you're complete. No, that's just the opening of the door. You're right there. You just have to continue on. And the more you continue on, realizations come in starts and stops. Sometimes it moves for a while, sometimes it stops, and all of a sudden there's something else. But you never think that you've got it all. That's the whole idea. We continue to practice, and you never have this idea. You have right view, and that's what's important. But that right view draws you into more profound realizations and mind experiences. I cannot call it mental states as much as the realization of mind via mind itself, beyond these words and phrases. And so this is where the Oxhead school was going with all of this, is pointing directly. It was actually mind pointing directly at phenomena. And as I was mentioning last week, it is not that we look beyond the finger and try to see beyond what's beyond the finger. Our practice is one that we're looking, and the person's pointing at the mind, and you're looking at the tip of the finger of that which is being pointed. You reverse the way of looking at things. And so now it is just mind looking into the phenomena. And what is it looking into is the Dharmakaya. It is seeing the mind ground, and it is clear about it. And we've talked about this, that I've been working on in the Mind Work forum, about the Ruzi and Rujing, this perception of mind, and the Dharmakaya, the mind itself that's there. And so what's important here, and what was being passed by this Oxhead school, was just this idea of just mind, and having mind there. And when you see mind in this way, it's different. We are always trying to define mind, and try to conceptualize what mind is. And it is very, very difficult, like a baby in a womb, thinking that is completely self-contained, and not realizing that that is connected by the womb, and is an embryo. It hasn't reached full maturation yet, but it's already there. The potentiality, everything is there. We cannot even begin to do that. Even me trying to struggle with words to try to describe that experience, that you all are within the womb of the Buddha, that everything is created by the Buddha. So there's two ways of looking at it. One of them is everything appearing as the Buddha, created by the Buddha. And the other one is that potentiality to become a Buddha. But that one doesn't set well with me, because there isn't a becoming that's there. There is just simply that this mind is the Buddha mind, and that's what Niutou was trying to pass on to people with this. And then let me read a little bit of a quote from this one Buddhist historian or scholar, McRae, and John McRae. And he says this, he says, fundamentally in agreement with those of the Northern School. And the Northern School was Shen polishing on subjects of mental contemplation and the necessity for constant practice. Both schools were known for their use of contemplative analysis. So contemplative is what I mentioned to you, but it could be different in terms of how we define contemplation. If we're contemplating in a cogitating way, that might be more of the Northern School versus contemplating just simply wall gazing. The major difference between the two schools lay in the Oxhead's use of certain logical pattern that included at one stage the extensive use of negation. Extensive use of negation. What does that remind you of? Like what would be the source of that? This is like a higher level. What's the source of that? Anybody? I know Santha's already, like, she's giving you a chance, last chance. Come on, extensive use of negation.
Heart Sutra.
Heart Sutra?
Mm-hmm.
Who uses extensive use of negation?
Nagarjuna.
Say it again?
Nagarjuna.
You mean Nagarjuna? Yeah, Nagarjuna. Now I know how to say his name, Nagarjuna. But yes, it is. And let me explain what they're saying. This extensive use of negation means that it is looking at things and saying, this is not real. And you were partially correct with what you were saying, because that was a very powerful tool for the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutras, is this idea of that, no, it's, Sariputra, it's not real. It is empty. And so when you start from this premise of emptiness, you work your way back and you can use this pattern of examination of appearances, whether it's time, an ego, space, and you can negate all of that. You can say these things do not exist. If it's time, how can you say what is the present moment? How can you say it's past or something in the future? If the future then becomes the present or the past, then it never really was the future. So this kind of a negation was used very, very strongly. And this is what was pouring in to the Prajnaparamita Sutras, not in a vacuum, but pouring in this whole idea of emptiness and this whole idea of that if somebody says, is it real or not real? Nagarjuna went, does it matter? We've got to look at this from a different viewpoint, which is non-dual. And so when we negate, we're actually working towards the non-duality of something in a very strange way, because we're negating a separate existence of something. But Nagarjuna was careful not to go further than that in terms of looking at it, just simply defining everything once it was reduced that it did not have a separate existence to it. He did not say phenomena is not real, or the mind is not real, or only the mind is real, or whatever, looking at apparent and absolute realities and not defining them within the context of the phenomenal world. in the samsaric world. He left that open, and actually, if you understand that, he blew the gateway, this gateless gate, wide open for everything, because if you practiced in this way, you'd be able to make it through and see that there is this emptiness, that we so often misunderstand what emptiness means. And it is not to negate or to say this is outside of it. It is just to say this does not have a separate existence, and using that kind of a mathematical formula, saying, like a Venn diagram, saying all of this is contained within mind, and since it is mind, it is the only thing that we can say that is there is the non-arising mind. The arising mind, as we talked about before, if it's moving, it's arising. That non-arising mind is there, and it's clear about it. And what it does is it governs how you function in samsara. You're no longer trying to be the best Boy Scout or Girl Scout. You're looking at it from the other viewpoint, and that reflection of mind reflects onto samsara, and that gives you the viewpoint without any kind of a locale as to what to do moment to moment, because you're not separate from any of the things that are there, at least in terms of phenomenal, and certainly by mind, there's no separation. And so all of this was coming through at this point. And when we study Chan, we have to study, because Chan did not per se, at least in the beginning, have a Chan school, have a Chan outlook. Everything that Chan was using was Indic in origin. It was from India. And then it gradually was changing some of that, so that we went from the Indic schools and using that to in the Chinese, there was a sinification of a lot of that, meaning kind of a Chinese spin on it. For instance, from the Yogacara school, then it became the Shen Wei Shulin school. I probably butchered that, but the consciousness only school in Chinese. And that was like something that was brought about because of the Yogacara. And we also brought in Hua Yang school from Vatamsaka Sutra and the Tiantai school. And so all of these schools were coming up, but everything had its roots in what had gone on before. And when we get to that and we start looking at these sutras, Mahayana sutras, there was this quantum shift in the orientation again for one, emptiness as being paramount to reality, and the other was more emphasis on the deliverance of sentient beings. And then therein kind of lied the rub, because we looked at sentient beings, and I'm sure it gives quite a few of you great consternation. What the heck is a sentient being? No. What is it? We always say it's a dream, so how can it be real? Is it real or not real? Ask Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna just says it's empty. And so you say, well, that doesn't get me anywhere. Well, you're not going anywhere. You're a dream. But why are we bothering? Why is a dream bothering to try to deliver a dream? And you want to know that, don't you? Don't you really want to know why is a dream trying to deliver a dream? Does it matter? But it's the difference between this nihilistic way of looking at things, where nothing matters, to the idea that this does matter. This is the the turn from Mahayana, where there was the emphasis more on compassion, to the Tathagata Garbha Sutras, which then bring in the idea of Buddha nature. And Buddha nature, again, was kind of balancing there between the idea of being monistic, meaning that there's a one God, one Buddha type of an approach, to this idea of the reliance on emptiness, so that one did not see the Buddha as some form of a super God that was there. And so it's important, but all of this is being done here and being done very delicately and very carefully by these different schools. They had these different orientations, but they never lost sight of the main Buddhist principles there. They just simply illuminated them, and through their own realizations began to interpret them more. But all of that was there and was pouring into the Chan school. So it was really wonderful, because all of these schools are there and being interpreted, and they're picking up the parts that follow along and are the key aspects to the practice. So when one practices Chan, if you don't know about the Abhidharma, if you don't know about the Madhyamika, if you don't know about Yogacara, or you were missing a very important historic roots and doctrinal roots as to where Chan came from. And you see it all the way through. That's why I took the time to do this, because it said this extensive use of negation was coming from the Madhyamika school. And so Chan just didn't develop in a vacuum, or somebody said, oh, I created this. It was a natural progression of the study of Buddha Dharma. Okay. And just one thing is, in terms of the negation, what they were doing was, Nagarjuna had his technique, as I mentioned, where he took people out to the illogical extremes of their positions, and that was called reductio ad absurdum, which means absurdum, excuse me, which means you reduce it down to the most absurd point, that they have to try to protect that position, even though it's unsupportable. And so it's something that's very, very powerful to use. Now, I want to switch gears, and then I want to touch on Song of Mind in a moment, but I want to go back to a little bit of Dao Shen. We're going to go back to him for a moment, and then you'll see kind of a progression of this thought, but a continuation of the theme, of the main theme. And in this part here, this was a part of a passage from the records of the patriarchs of the Lankavatara, and it says, all our actions are Bodhi. There is no Buddha apart from mind, and no mind apart from Buddha. Reciting the name of the Buddha is reciting the mind. Seeking the mind is seeking Buddha. If you know the principle that consciousness is without identity, and Buddha is without form, and also Buddha has no image, your mind will be at rest. Now, right there, you're seeing some references to Diamond Sutra, where the Buddha cannot be known by his 32 marks. And then it's talking about the principle of consciousness, and you're right back into the Yogacara school. Okay. And again, with in this part, we're talking about another disciple of Dao Shen, which was Fa Yong. Y-U-N-G. I don't know, how would you pronounce it in Chinese? Anybody? Fai Young. Y-U-N-G, nobody knows? No? All right. So nobody can challenge my pronunciation of it. But in any case, here, Fai Young is carrying on. And again, this is very much related to what Niutou was presenting, which was the idea of non-being, or mind and no mind, and then this idea of non-being, to try to break people's reliance on the ego and trying to use this egocentric viewpoint to try to break through mind, which is not possible. And so they brought about this idea of non-being to try to break that. And then it says, a man asks, when the mind is in action, how is it put to rest? Fai Young answered, when the mind is in action, there is no mind to act. To talk about names and forms is useless, but to speak directly is without obstruction. No mind is the good time to be in action. Constant action does not act. The no mind in which I speak of is not different from the mind. Again, it's just simply saying that one is in a state of Chan. I shouldn't even call it state of Chan because it's not a mental state as much as it's just a direct connection or absorption of the body and the ego into mind, and mind is directing the conduct via function that's necessary to be harmonious in that moment. And so this, we were talking about this earlier before you came on, is the impeccability of mind. When the mind is completely still, it is reflected in the movement of the mind from moment to moment to moment. And it doesn't matter. We do not say, oh, Gilbert is there or Gilbert is not there. It doesn't matter. Mind is simply directing the environment at that point in the best way it can via this corporal body and via its mind attention and transmission of a message via mind to other minds that are there, that are we would call sentient beings. But it's simply trying to tune the radio to mind to the people around. And so when you do that, then it creates more tranquility, more harmony. So you tune into the station with your mind. And so, and then as you tune and you let go of the ego, little by little, you begin to get more experience using it, and you begin to it begins to reflect in what's happening in your environment. Okay, and in an essay titled Absolute Contemplation, he explains no mind clearly. And again, we're still talking about Fai Young. And this is one I've used many, many times, but I think at this time it's a good time to revisit this. I normally have it and present it in a question and answer way to have you answer it, but we do not have that time today. It says, how does one name mind? How does one make the mind at rest? So what are you going to call mind? What was the reference of the ancients to what they referred mind to? Anybody? Lewis? You have to unmute him, or is he unmuted? His mouth is moving, but there's no.
Way.
Try again, because none of that.
The
was-
way.
The way. The Tao. That's Chinese.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the ancients.
No, I'm talking about the ancients way before the Tao came in.
I don't know about
What
that.
did they call it? What was the Buddha referred to? It wasn't really a name. I'll give you a hint. It starts with a TATHA. Nobody know? All
Thus?
right. Thus. Yeah, thus. You could translate tathatha as thus or thusness, but how do you define thus? If you're going to define, if somebody asks you, Lewis, what does thus mean? What would you say to them?
If I said anything, it would be wrong because it would be attaching a name to something that automatically limits what you're talking about.
That's why they called it thus or suchness. Well, what's such? You can't even begin to conceive or put anything. That was the name of the Buddha, which was a no name. It's no mind, just mind. Okay, so and how do we put it at rest? So he says, you need not create the mind, and you also need not make the mind rest by force. This is real peace. This is wonderful, wonderful Dharma. You don't create the mind. That's a conjuring up of things within the samsaric realm. It's in a dream. But the dream only exists in the dream. It's outside of the dream. It is just, some mental formations within mind, but it doesn't have any kind of independent validity. And so then, and you don't have to quiet it. You don't have to stop the dream and say, stop right now. You just have to little by little modify it until by its nature, it will be at rest. And then what is the mind? And it says what makes the six organs able to contemplate is called mind. And that's important, not what able to perceive, but to contemplate, to look and to see. Because when we see that via that, even though we're samsaric beings, we can use the senses to contemplate that what mind is. It enables us to see that via the appearances and causes and conditions. We see clearly what mind is. What does mind do? Mind is still. What is the substance of the mind? What is the mind made out of? Okay, there should be nobody that could not answer this question. What is the mind made out of? All right, how many of you know the answer? Raise your hand. All right. Jane, you don't know the answer? No?
Just mind.
Just mind. See, you got it. Good job. So it says, what is the substance? The mind is the substance. Everything is created by the mind. Mind creates everything, therefore everything is mind. That should take you a long way, Michael, in quantum mechanics, I would think. What is the primary meaning of mind? Mind is the primary meaning. So we're trying to look and say, what is the purpose of mind? Mind. It is just the way it works. You know, there's not something written on some tablet, you know, cut in cuneiform writing or whatever that says the commandments of mind. The precepts, they didn't exist until samsara came into being. It was just mine. It's mine. You can't go beyond that. What is wandering in meditation and wisdom? The stillness of the mind and the inner nature is meditation. Constantly understanding stillness is wisdom. There's a lot of little quotes, but I just wanted to pick out a few things that kind of set the theme during this time period. And it was saying, actually, the main difference between Shen Shu and Hui Ning is that the former, Shen Shu, emphasized meditation and the latter emphasized understanding mind and seeing through to the original nature. For instance, when Shen Shu's disciple, Qi Chen, told Hui Ning that Shen Shu's teaching was keeping one's mind on contemplating stillness and sitting constantly without lying down, Hui Ning criticized it and said, keeping one's mind on contemplation, the sickness or the stillness is a sickness, not a meditation. Sitting constantly will hurt one's body and not good for principle. So then Hui Ning composed this poem, very interesting poem. Since birth, we sit without lying down. After death, we will lie down without sitting. In origin, we are just a stinking skeleton. How can we establish merit and demerit on this? This is pretty good stuff. I mean, it is like samsara, quack. It's just a big slap to the idea that you're going to become enlightened, or that your skeleton, oh my gosh, you know, your skeleton is going to be enlightened. Perhaps maybe the muscles, right? Maybe the skin. I don't think so. He's just saying the way it is. And so when you look at this, it's this way. Now, he indicated this idea of contemplation, and this, what he's referring to is this kind of a cogitation contemplation. If we simply just sit and not do anything, this is what I call contemplation or wall gazing when we sit to meditate. When we're up and about, we use the same kind of wall gazing, but only everything is in movement at that point, but the stillness comes from the mind itself. And it does not come from forcing the body to be still and forcing the mind to be still. It comes from the realization that all is mind. So it's a very, very different, but it's very, very subtle. Let's see where we are. Okay. And again, this is reinforced by a quote or a passage by Hui Ning called Formless. And he says, if your mind is plain, it is unnecessary to keep the precepts. If your action is straight, it is useless to practice meditation. To repay your parent, you must be filial. To bring justice to superior and inferior, you must be compassionate. Being humble, you're able to keep harmony with those who are higher or lower than you. Being patient, you're able to quit all evils. If you work hard as well as getting fire, boring wood, you will be like the red lotus, which is produced from dirty mud. The good medicine tastes bitter. The kind advice grates on the ears. Mending your ways will produce wisdom. Concealing your faults is not the good mind. You will benefit if you cultivate every day. If you cannot achieve the Buddha only by giving money to, you cannot achieve the Buddha only by giving money to others. Only in mind can you find the way of the Bodhi. It is unnecessary to seek for mystery outside. Having heard this, you must cultivate according to it. The paradise is just before you. Now, this is really important because it is looking directly into mind, but not necessarily dismissing samsara or samsaric actions or samsaric practices. And this belies the accusations that there was a northern and southern school that were incompatible. They are perfectly compatible if you use wisdom to see it and you see how it works. But it is in this practice, that's why I always say that the practice should be from the mind down and reflecting in this way, then everything is perfectly in its place. If we try to turn a mechanical puppet into a god or a Buddha, it's not going to happen. So we have to look at things very clearly and see the Buddha nature in everything. This was the subtle wisdom that was being communicated. And this subtleness of this wisdom is very profound. But you see how he wrote this it is ordinary and mundane. It's not trying to seek the super. It is just simply looking at things as they are. And when we see them in this way, it changes. Now, let me see how much time I've got. A little bit more time. The computer went to sleep on me. Okay, we saw that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the Song of Mind. And in the Song of Mind, we're going to read a few of the verses there. And you'll see that whatever I've been talking about today is right in the Song of Mind. It says, the nature of the mind is non-arising. So the nature of it, we don't know the Buddha nature. The Buddha nature knows us, but we do not know it. But using the Buddha nature, there is no difference. What need is there for knowledge and views? Again, this is addressing the idea that the Buddha mind is conceptual, that can be obtained simply by knowledge, not practice. And the emphasis here is that one has to practice this to make it their own. If it was that easy, just reading the Song of Mind, you could become instantly enlightened, but it doesn't work that way. That is because Chan ultimately is beyond words and phrases. Originally, there is not a single Dharma, not definitely Hui Ning, right? And talking about originally there was no mirror, stand bright. Why discuss inspiration and training? Coming and going without beginning. Coming and going without beginning. What is that referring to? This is the second go round for this particular one. Anybody coming and going without beginning. What does that mean?
Tathagata.
Anything else? Tathata agata. Coming and going, right? So how do you say that?
Tathagata.
So that's the other one. There's a coming and there's going without beginning. It's very interesting. You see, so all of these messages are right there. You already have the Tathagata Garbha Sutras, the Garbha meaning embryo, is already here and being referred to. Sought for, it is not seen. No need to do anything. We heard the other Chan poem that starts, have you heard of the man with the Tao, man of the Tao that has nothing to do? Or Shifu's death poem, busy doing nothing. The same thing, because it is talking about non-being. There is not a being, a life and being that's there. We don't understand that because we still want to become enlightened as we should, but we have to put it in the proper perspective, which is the mind's eye. It is bright, still, self-apparent. It's just like Bai Song saying, it wasn't until today that I noticed that my nostrils pointed downward. It's plain as the nose on your face. I know some of you Chinese who are nasally challenged cannot see your nose. But for us European or Indian people, we certainly can see our nose, and it's just as plain as that. Okay.
Gilbert, I have to say, speak for yourself, because I used to be teased about my small nose all through my childhood.
Well, I think people with a big nose always look at people with a small nose and say, I wish I had a small nose. So I don't know anything about, I say that your nose is kind of fits right in the middle way. Nagarjuna would be happy with your nose. Okay. Sorry, I lost my place here. Knowing anything in the basic principle is lost. It's very funny because when I was young, my dad would be telling us something very important, some lesson, and we'd go, I know that, I know. And my dad would say, Cornel, I know. With the I know, you know nothing. And he was right, And so it's kind of a funny thing, because when I look at it now and he twisted these things around, he was pretty wise. And so he says, but when you're young, you think you know everything. Casting a clear light on the world, illuminating, yet obscured if one-mindedness is impeded. So if you have this one-mindedness, being mind itself, the mind's perspective, then everything is illuminated. It truly is illuminated. Now, we do not have the illumination of a complete enlightenment of a Buddha, but we are able to pick up subtle information from the environment if we use the perspective of the mind's eye. When we don't, then we're just stuck in the ego and we can't see anything around us. Of course, we can see the images around us, but we don't know anything about the meaning. We don't know the intention of the people around us. We don't know anything except our mind saying, smile, look cute, or get angry, harm this person, or whatever. But that's just simply blindness. That's the obscuration of the mind if the one-mindedness is impeded. All dharmas are misunderstood. And then again, it comes and says, coming and going thus, if there is a need for thorough investigation, arising without a mark of arising and illumination are the same. So something is arising but without a mark of arising. What does that mean? It means that it even though it arises phenomenally, it doesn't have its own independence. So here it's going to the 12 Nidana and the codependency on everything around it. It is right there. And so it's seeing things as it is. And going back through this, you get to Pratika Samappada. And it's very interesting. I had one of my students that's been somewhat estranged for a while contact me, and she said, you used to always say Pratika Samappada, and she never got it. And then she had an epiphany that she had to share with me that Pratika Samappada is there, and it's mind. And it took her a few years to get there, but she got there, and it was very happy for me to see that she was still working on it, and it finally hit. It was one of the deepest depth charges I'd ever dropped on somebody that exploded a few years later, but it worked. And so this idea that we look at it and we see Pratika Samappada's mind, how does that work? We have to contemplate, we have to look into it, and we use our environment as the place and where we study. Remember, I've said many times, the Buddhas use the vexations of sentient beings to study and to practice. Desiring to purify the mind, there is no mind for effort. Throughout time and space, nothing is illuminated. This is the most profound. Knowing dharmas is non-knowing. So again, here is this idea of negation of phenomenal experiences, but not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, looking at that and precisely as mind. It is this idea of non-knowing from the viewpoint of a samsaric sentient being. So when we don't have the idea of knowing via a sentient being, which is very hard for us to extricate that extra layer of ego that's there, then it doesn't work right. It's like we have this bottle of 7-Up or a glass of 7-Up, but at the top, instead of the bubbles, there's just a little bit of scum on the top, and we can't see through and clear. We just don't understand that that's there. Or I shouldn't say scum, let's say it's bubbles. The bubbles keep you from seeing the bottom. And we just are calm until those bubbles dissipate, then everything is clear. I think that's a better analogy. At least sounds more appetizing. And again, this is the most profound. It's not something that's easy for us because we want it to be delivered and given to you so that you could say, okay, here it is. What is the meaning of life? And so you want to know that. Gilbert, can you tell me what the meaning of life is? My favorite is the sound of one hand clapping. So if you're ever around me, just ask me about what the sound of one hand clapping, and I will demonstrate it to you. Okay. So I'll be seeing some of you a little bit later on this year. You can ask me. Okay. Don't sue me. Okay. All right. That's it for today. We can continue on, but it's kind of we get the feel for this. Again, the idea of mind, no mind, being, non-being, and looking directly into mind. But the idea here, and what's important with this is the emphasis is on the realization that just this mind is the Buddha mind, is the Buddha nature. And if we maintain that mind, then from that viewpoint of mind, and do not think that this is a dualism of the perspective of the mind because it's a different perception than the mind of a sentient being that's subject and object. The perception of the Buddha uses all perceptions available in all directions and all times. We cannot even begin to contemplate what that is, but one could experience it in a snap of a finger. So these things are all coming into play, and when we see them in this way, it helps us understand how to practice in the right way. You are not practicing Gilbert's strange or bizarre, mind work. Mind work is just simply what the ancients have been writing about for many, many years. It's not something that I'm making up, but a lot of times people, they don't know that, they're afraid. They have a fear of listening to something that they don't understand. Why should I tell you something that you understand? If you already understand it, there's no need for me to talk. I don't have to. What I'm doing is giving you an invitation to properly practice Chan. This is what's important. But if we do not have that kind of an experience, then it doesn't work in the right way. So don't be afraid of what I'm saying, and don't get frustrated if you don't understand it. If you understood it completely, either I'm better than the Buddha, because the Buddha couldn't do it either. And I certainly can't do that, but I can show you the map of how to get there, but you have to do it yourself. And that's what the Buddha did. So if we understand it in this way, there's no magic elixir. It is just practice. When you practice properly, it will come to you. I guarantee you. Why? Because causes and conditions never fail. Pratika Samappada. Okay, so keep practicing, and I'll take some questions on my telephone. Oh, Harry's up first. Go ahead.
Hi, Gilbert. I'm wondering if you would like to comment on Master Dogen's life question, and I could read a short koan. This because his life question seems to be surrounding everything you've been talking about. Was, if we have Buddha nature, why do we have to practice? That was one of the things that generated his investigation. So it's a relatively short, just about
go ahead.
8 lines. Okay. Zen master Bao Che of Mount Mayu was fanning himself. A monk approached and said, "Master, the nature of wind is permanent, and there is no place it does not reach. Why then do you fan yourself?" "Although you understand that the nature of the wind is permanent," Bao Che replied, "you do not understand the meaning of its reaching everywhere." "What is the meaning of its reaching everywhere?" asked the monk again. The master just kept fanning himself. The monk bowed deeply. So, and then there's a kind of commentary there, but I think that's the essential thing.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
No, I mean, it takes that life question of, we have Buddha nature. Why do we have to practice? And it's metaphorically embedded in this koan. And I think that's really wonderful. I just wanted to see what you say.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just like you said, it's what I've been presenting, that, it's not just simply that you get on the boat, and you're ferried across. You have to paddle, and you have to work. But the distinction is, again, the one that this story's been with me all week, of the boatman and the monk that came, and so he wanted to be pushed or pulled across the river. In those days, they had a rope, and the boatman would have a raft, and he would pull them across. And so So he said, I will I'll pull you across for free if you answer this question. And so the monk says, yes, okay, fine, because he had asked him what he was practicing. And so the boatman said, your fishing line is 5 fathoms long, but your quarry is 6 fathoms deep. Speak. And the monk went like what? And so the boatman just pushed him over the side. and it is in this way that we fan ourselves with this understanding. This is a little tweaking of the profound. And so we know that the fanning is just a manifestation, but it's something that we have to do and set into motion. But once set into motion, there's no need to cross to the other side. It's just simply, who in fact is the fish that we're seeking to catch. And so it's interesting. I mean, these are things that you can just go around and round for a long time on, but they're wonderful because they point to it, but in a way in which one has to work it, in terms of that. And it isn't in the passing of a goan as much as it is the working of the goan that brings about a realization. There is no answer to the koan, and I think that to me is a part of a flaw in the system. If one passes a koan, I'm kind of revising what I said before, but it would be, one can easily pass gas, but that doesn't mean that you can fly. Sorry, belated apologies. But in any case, okay, David.
Oh, thank you, Gilbert. I was reading along here on Song of Mind, and I only got as far as the first sentence. The nature of mind is non-arising. I don't really understand that or follow that.
David, I could tell you that, but your quarry would still be a fathom deeper than my answer. I think you need to work that.
Okay.
All right. It's stuck, and let it be stuck like a sweet taffy stuck on the back of your mouth that you can't swallow it, but you want to resolve it, but it's sweet. But work on it. It's very, very important. It's one in which my senior student, Rick Cabrera, I always had to remember, which was that to know the arising mind is the non-arising mind. So that'll give you a little bit of a push. To know the arising mind is the non-arising mind. So some of you should be able to work on this. And I think, Esther, you should, because I've been telling you that for the past week. Okay, so work on that one, David. It's a good one. Lewis.
Thank you, Gilbert. I enjoyed the Oxhead's poem because I really like it, because he seems to be that almost like a central figure between the Taoist sages and Dharma masters, with a huge amount of knowledge about both things. A little bit, but I still feel a lot like Matsu before he got enlightened. I absolutely need that time on the cushion first before I can try to work with the mind when I'm not on the cushion. Once in a while, sitting on the cushion gives me some kind of a sense that this me is just not pushing anymore. But when I'm walking, sometimes it's like I'm on the cushion, but moving. And I think that for me to keep doing that, it seems that it's the cushion is so essential, and to be just sitting, and then to try to be just sitting when I'm walking. That's a really hard thing, because I think that helps me going through this poem and the other masters, what they're talking about, including Dogen. It helps me approach everyday Chan. And so I really thank you for going over this poem and explaining it, even though we just got to the first 2 verses. I hope that we get further into it next time.
What is it that when you sit on a cushion brings you relief?
It's a lack of worrying about day-to-day things, about not having to go anywhere or be anywhere.
Then is it just kind of like pulling the covers over your head when you're in bed?
No, it's like the first time I ever sat down and tried to meditate without having anybody telling me what it was or what it wasn't, what I should do or what I shouldn't do, and without any expectation. It seems that it comes back to that.
Then when you get off the cushion, maintain that mind. Don't think that it's not doable. Just the same way that you are practicing, practice it in your daily life. If you're practicing in the right way, you should be able to sustain that mind, that harmonious mind in the present moment at any time. Don't think that it's solely the province of gluing your bottom to a cushion. It is at all times. When you're sitting on the cushion, you're just simply on the practice field. When you get up off the cushion, now you're in the game. That's when it counts. That's when the points are scored. Okay, so you have to know how to do that. So you practice on the cushion, but you get up and you try to be in a state of Chan throughout the whole day. Just keep reminding yourself to be in a state of Chan. Be aware, aware, aware. It will work. Okay, it'll kind of switch the priorities in terms of when you're meditating. You're a sincere practitioner and you're going through the things that you need to do. And you have to understand there's a lot of people, some of them are new here, but there's a lot of people who have been practicing for many, many years. And so they are a little bit ahead of you in the meditation aspect, but you're so fortunate because you're kind of here and it's like saying, all right, it's like you're sitting in with a bunch of jazz musicians that can really play. But so you have to bring your best game every single time, which you do. So I'm very happy about that. And so it won't be long before you find, that you're able to play as well as anybody here. Okay, just keep working with what you're doing. Okay, any other questions? I'm surprised. So, Jing, okay, Jing Meyer. Hello.
Hello, Gilbert. My question is, could you talk a little bit more about what is enlightenment? Is the enlightenment, is that what practitioner trying to achieve? And what consider that someone it reached, it was enlightened, get into that level or stage, or how do we define or determine?
Yeah, I for myself try to stay away from the term. I used it a couple of times today, but I generally try to stay away from it just simply because the misconceptions of the term. So you have a legitimate question to ask about what is enlightenment. I prefer to use the word awakening, because awakening isn't so much saying, when we're saying enlightenment, it's more towards the terms of what the Tibetans use as a complete enlightenment. But we have along the way realizations, and these realizations are experiences. They are not mental formations or mental conjurings. Imagine if you were in some kind of a electronic game, okay, and you experienced outside the game. You would have no idea of, one, the existence of outside the game, and the infiniteness of outside the game. There's no way you could do that, but you can touch it, and break through to I can't even call it experience, because it's not an experience of a sentient being. It's outside the sentient being. And the revelation is the sentient being is a dream. And that one is experiencing that the dreamer, and realizing that whatever is there was a conjuring of someone, but it questions the reality of this this samsaric world. And when we question the reality of it, it begins to break down, and we see it for what it is. It doesn't mean that the whole world deconstructs before your very eyes. There may be experiences where everything breaks down and then comes back. I've had experience where it's as if the stage was struck and you're watching a play, and all of a sudden all the scenery goes down, and you realize, well, this isn't real. This wasn't even real scenery. What the heck was that? And then it comes back up like rebooting of a computer. But you saw it when that scenery wasn't there. I shouldn't say you, but mind experienced that. And so mind now begins to drive a wedge into this idea of this reality, and begins to see that more consistent with what the sutras are saying in terms of this reality. Now, us being practitioners avoids us from being a pratika Buddha, which is somebody who has an experience, but does not understand the profoundness, and cannot use Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, this profound wisdom, to interpret or to begin to cultivate that, to words are very difficult at this point, to kind of see those things. And so these things happen, and people can have an awakening. You initially have an awakening just simply from the Dharma, a Dharma awakening, that everything is a dream. How do you do that? Easy place to start is the Diamond Sutra. And you read about that and you understand everything is a dream. And then from there, you keep working on that. And then maybe one day there's a realization. And that realization leads to others if one's sincerely practicing. Other people, they get a realization, they think that they're enlightened and walk around acting enlightened, which is very pitiable. We should never, ever think that any realization is the end-all realization as much as just simply a peak. That mind enables us, and it reveals. I don't know how to explain that. It reveals what's outside of mind. When I say outside, meaning that what's outside the dream, and the machinations that bring forth the dream world. And so it's kind of interesting in terms of that. And that is what I would call an awakening or illumination of the mind. The ordinary and mundane still here because we still are functioning in this world, but we know the difference. Everything is illuminated, and it transcends the idea of the three-dimensional world, where things can be, for instance, they use the analogy of that a billion Buddha worlds are sitting on a mote of dust. How can that be? Because it's beyond dimensions. It's beyond anything of conception. When they talk about kalpas, a kalpa can pass by in a snap of fingers, but we cannot do that because it's difficult for us to measure time other than us in the dream world. So all of these things are out. I hesitate to say outside of mind, but outside of the samsaric experiences that cannot be conceived of. And they can only be talked about in a very crude and inefficient way. But it gives you an idea of how things happen, how what even one of the Theravadins in one book said, the way things are. And so that is what this illumination of the mind or realizations or awakening is. A complete enlightenment would be the ultimate realization of a Buddha, a complete Buddha. We never abandon that as a goal. And so we don't settle for second place or participation trophy or whatever. We use our faith to drive us forward, knowing, whatever time is in samsara, in the Buddha mind, it's irrelevant. So that hopefully that helps you a little bit. Okay. But it's not like you going and meeting the Buddha and the Buddha gives you a laurel wreath and a light bulb to put above your head to illuminate everywhere, and gives you a certificate. It doesn't work that way. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Gilbert.
You're welcome. Okay, Robert. Are you awake? Hello?
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a question regarding sitting, just the practice of the methodology of it. On April 24th, I somehow you were mentioning about, you were talking a lot about staying in the awareness of the mind, and somehow, and you say that the mind will teach you. And somehow I decided to try it during meditation, because the last several years I was just counting my breath or reciting Buddha name with 1, 2, 3, 4. It's reasonably quiet, but the last 2 weeks during morning practice, I was trying to use just awareness in the whole sitting. And I don't know if I did anything right or not, or did it properly. Today you mentioned about Rekse, the non-arising, know the arising. And during meditation, it seems that the more I stay in awareness, maybe I can use the word state. As the thought came, I am aware of the thought. But the funny thing is, the minute I am aware of the thought, the thought or the arising thought disappear. first question is why? Second question is what happened? And I was quite easy to stay in awareness and not trying to block or push the arising or coming thoughts. But as they come, it's almost like, it's like something just came into the crosshair of a sniper. You don't even have to look. The awareness almost have a autopilot and know where the arising is. You just, as soon as I seems to aware that it is, and then it just, I mean, maybe actually I can use the word disappear, but it doesn't continue. Is it, am I doing something right? Was it something wrong? Or it's just a phenomena itself is an illusion, but I seems to be quite able to stay in, it seems quite comfortable to stay in that awareness state during my morning sitting. So I'm seeking some advice if I'm heading the right direction or not.
Yeah, sometimes I wish I had more wisdom and to how to respond to you. No, even after all of this time period, it's difficult to frame the right words, the words of encouragement, words of not yet, but words of way to go, and the experience, and without messing everything up. And I'm hesitant to comment too much on what you're saying, just simply because this is probably the closest that you've been to it. But if I say too much like that, then all of a sudden it will mess you up. All I can say, and then I'm also talking to those who will be Dharma presenters in the future. Remember this moment. No, but all I can say is go back again and do the same things that you did before. And also recognize when ego arises that too should be illuminated, so that you don't sit there and go like this, because as soon as you do that, you're out. But if you can find the way to keep the skills there, then I think that where you're going with this will work. It will pay off dividends. What I've been telling you guys, I don't know how many times I'm telling you how to do this. And for some reason, it finally hit you. And so just keep going in this way. Write it out like you're writing a wave surfing. Just write it till the very end, and then just keep seeing, manifesting this awareness. And again, this awareness is just naked mind. And don't give it any impression. Don't go like Star Wars and go pew, 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 knocking out all of the things that are arising in mind. Just simply just keep still. And it's just there. And it is not Robert that is doing any of this. It's doing it in spite of Robert. Okay. Robert gets in the way. But you don't have to be a self-flagellant where you punish yourself if he appears. You just simply illuminate that this is natural, that Robert would get excited or he would wonder and stuff. Just keep doing what you're doing. Just make it last longer. Okay? All right. All right. And that's all a product of good work and sincere work. I mean, to do that. If you listen to what he said or what he's doing, and you listen to me and how I tell you how to practice, you'll get those experiences. It's so easy. It's so easy. You just don't have to pay attention to all the scenery. You don't have to push it out. You just simply have to sit. And it's as if you're sitting, and then all of a sudden, all of the cosmos begins to rotate around you. And it's so clear and quiet. And everything is there, whether it's a mote of dust that's moving around you or entire galaxies, it doesn't matter. It is just this vast infiniteness of mind. And it's just simply there. It has no measurement to it in the way, at least in samsaric existence. Okay. So good work. Any last questions? Okay. Well, you on the East Coast get to go to sleep half an hour earlier. So we'll see how that works. I'm happy to do that. Oh, there's Wendy's coming in with a late entry.
Thank you. You say it's so easy. Well, anyway, I heard something. It says a master told the disciple, use the right way that I teach you. Then in 3 years, you might have some good result or something. But then the disciple said, what if I really try really hard? He said, it's going to take you 10 years. Okay, so
yeah, 10 years. Yeah, it is what I was saying. It's simple. We don't make it complicated. We don't struggle with it. It is the right effort, Wendy. Remember that. It's always the right effort. You always hold everything like this, just very lightly. In the beginning, you might have to hold it like this to develop the concentration, but little by little, loosen it up, and then it's just like you're holding on to it just by barely touching and when you do that, it will work for you. Okay, but yeah, that's what's happening. You don't use excessive effort, or you're not so lazy with it. I think the Buddha had said that if you tighten a lute, the stringed instrument, too tight, the string breaks. If you tighten it too loose, it won't play music. So it's just the right effort. And so you use just the right effort, enough to keep your attention in one place. And then you do that. And then going back to Robert for a moment, this is not a state of mind. It's mind, Robert. It's not a state of mind. There's a difference, a big difference of life and death. Okay. All right. I guess that's it for today. And again, thank you for joining in. This is challenging material, but to me, it's very exciting to present this to you and to show you the roots of Chan and the roots of what you're doing, and showing you, this is something that's very important, that you're not making, I'm not making this up. This goes back from years and years of study to present this to you. Okay, I will